Welcome to The Treatment Plan, a podcast about how healthcare really works, from weight loss and patient care to the systems and incentives behind it all. Hosted by Jack Usher and David Usher, MD.
Okay, so 3 things based on our conversation last time. There's exercise, the calorie discussion, and then satiety and fiber. So we'll just go through each one of those. But let's start with exercise. Exercise, as most people probably know, there's a great quote from Dr. Peter Attia, which if anybody's into the health and fitness influencer media space probably know who he is. He's made a great quote that basically to the effect of, if there was a miracle drug that improves health outcomes, improves your longevity, mental and physical health, metabolic health, body composition, blah, 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 and it was in a pill, it would do the same thing as what regular exercise does for you. So your stance on exercise, especially for people who are trying to lose weight, who are obese, is a little bit counterintuitive, I would say. But I kind of want you to expound on how you think about it for those patients when they come in and they're trying to lose weight and get healthier.
Well, first of all, I would agree with my colleague, Dr. Attia, in that exercise across the board, I think is, and I tell my patients, it's good for 100 different things related to your total health, right? And lots of science to back that up. Exercise is good for depression. You can treat mild depression with exercise alone, and you don't need medications. For example, exercise for cardiovascular health, cardiovascular rehab, heart rehab after a heart attack. What do? They teach you to exercise and show you can do it, and do it in a safe, kind of graded fashion so that you can get to some routine, which is good for you, increase your fitness, and so on. When I, as a medical weight loss professional, pretty early on, and really intuitively as a family physician, without the board certification in obesity medicine, one of the things I kind of perceived early on, and I have really hung my hat on this, is people who come to us for help losing weight are not people who don't understand that they have a problem. They all understand that exercise would be really good for them. I think exercise as a weight loss strategy has been oversold. Doctors say, just eat less and move more. I mean, that's the traditional thing that doctors have said to patients for a long time. Change that energy in, energy out equation. If you increase your energy out, you'll burn more calories, right? Burn more energy, burn fat, lose weight. And that has been, to people who really struggled with their weight, they probably feel like they've been gaslighted. Like, I've tried these things and they don't work. But there's also, when people depending on the severity of the problem, there's a lot of people who are just too miserable. They try to exercise and they just hurt, and it doesn't take long many times to just, I saw a lady yesterday for a new appointment. She's like, yeah, my knees hurt so bad from my arthritis in my knees, my feet hurt. I want to start walking again. I want to start doing things. But they've been told, or they have inferred, but I think mostly we've just been telling people for the longest time that this is how you lose weight: diet and exercise. I heard it the other day in that the Eli Lilly CEO interview, talking about, well, these are adjuncts to diet and exercise. And I would say, so my own position philosophically and what I do with my patients, because I understand that people have been told this for years and years. Well, let's not talk about exercise then. Let's focus completely on your food, right? Right. Yeah. Right. Or, yeah, well, what I would say is diet is 100%. Yeah, and the people who are trying to get their body fat down, right? I mean, we routinely see people with 75, 100 pounds of excess body fat, which we measure with a body composition analyzer. It kicks out a number based on height, weight, age, gender, basically compared to a kind of a standard average control. It gives us a number. Here's the number of excess pounds of body fat that you're carrying around. And it'll also tell us if somebody is sarcopenic and they have too little muscle, it'll give us that number and say, you're 4 pounds under muscled, basically. That's a very nice number to be able to share with people. But in any case, people will come in and they've been through, they've very often one of the questions we ask when they come in, what have you done before programmatically? What kind of weight loss programs have you done before? Have you ever used weight loss medications before? And very often people have 3, 4, 5 things they've done. It might be a shake program. It might be, Weight Watchers or, all various things you hear.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that for a second. And I want to dig into just a little bit how you think about the crossover, almost it's kind of the undue influence of the health and fitness, I'm saying that in quotes, the health and fitness industry versus the medical industry kind of in this space. It feels like it's been almost a recent development that we've come around kind of culturally as identifying or classifying obesity, being overweight, as a medical problem that requires medical intervention.
Right.
For the longest time, for decades, since it's kind of become on the rise to be overweight and obese from the, maybe the 70s, the 80s and on, it's been almost solely the realm of fitness,
health and wellness
influencers, or the DVDs, the workout videos of the past, because it just feels like that, maybe because they're just a lot better at selling and marketing and they need to eat, unlike doctors who have all this other stuff going on. But can you just say a little bit about that, and maybe if you've seen any changes recently about more people becoming attuned to the fact that they need medical intervention? And like you said, you probably have tons of people who are, I tried to join a gym, or I tried to health and wellness my way to success, and probably didn't have a lot of success there.
Yeah, that in and of itself is a really great point. American Society of Bariatric Physicians, that's the old term for what is now the Obesity Medicine Association. Years and years ago, they've been pushing for a long time to say obesity is its own disease. It has, when you look at, still, I don't know whether what I would call mainstream medicine talks about it this way, but your body fat is actually your largest endocrine organ, right? When people talk about endocrinology, they think thyroid and adrenal glands and pancreas and things like that, but they don't think body fat. I don't think anybody goes into endocrinology, at least years ago, people didn't go into endocrinology thinking, yes, I'm going to treat this sick body fat that these people have. But when you think somebody's like, for example, this guy I was talking about, 100 pounds over fat, excess body fat, that's a huge organ. And those body fat cells, this isn't like a gas tank that's kind of inert and just sits there and holds energy, this form of energy called gasoline. Body fat is very metabolically active. And we haven't talked about it that way, but when you look at all the diseases that come from excess body fat, those are fueled by the inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-6, things like that occur as a result of that excess body fat, but what we call adiposopathy or sick fat. There's other names people use, but for a long time, the medical weight loss docs, the bariatric physicians, the obesity medicine doctors have been saying this is its own disease. It really needs to be recognized that when people get like this, it is a disease. It's its own disease state. For the longest time, I would say the AMA, and therefore its counterpart in government called CMS or Medicare, did not recognize obesity as its own disease state, right? They might tell you that you have a BMI of this or BMI of that, but to say that it was a disease, the implication is, as soon as it becomes a disease state, is that an insurance company would have to somehow pay to treat it, right? And the insurance lobby has huge influence. I can't tell you exactly what all the causes are, but it took a long time for the American Medical Association to finally step up and say, yes, we have to say it's a disease. It is its own disease. And
It seems insane to me that just there was a protracted battle about something that
yeah,
feels so obvious.
Right. To those of us in the field, it's like you what are you not seeing, right? What can you not see? So in any case, the evidence has been now it has piled up and even they can't resist it. So obesity has been tagged as a disease state. So when you talk about drugs that treat obesity, in the old days, they would talk about them as appetite suppressants. One medication I use a lot of is called phentermine, which is other people like to tag that's a stimulant. But if that was to get approved now, it would, like a GLP-1 drug, it'd be you could get it approved to treat for the chronic management of obesity, and nobody will bring that case because it's been around for 70 years. So you'd have to retool it again to deal with that. But actually, somebody did that with a drug called Qsymia, but they had to mix it with Wellbutrin or bupropion to make that happen. But then they charged $300 for it instead of $10 per month. And so, any case, the obesity as a disease took a long time to get approved. Formally or recognized as a disease state, and so now it is. And of course, you got drug companies going after all these expensive options.
The idea that you're digging at, maybe I'm off base, but because that shift didn't happen for such a long time, that because of this influence of the insurance lobby, or because obesity wasn't recognized as a disease, you had this problem of people being overweight and obese, but it was kind of funneled out of the medical system for various reasons, and thus was picked up by kind of the next best option, which is the health and fitness space.
And I think that, there's some generational or cultural influence on it. Like, people with obesity were seen as slothful and lazy, undisciplined, and so on. And so 70 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, the obesity rate was like 5% or something in this country, 10% maybe. I mean, it was very low, and relative to what it is now. If you look back in Wisconsin, you go to these museums that have old loggers museums, and they'll have a lineup of these 40 guys who are out there logging the white pines. And you look at them all and go, somebody give these guys a sandwich. Are they not feeding these lumberjacks? But everybody in those days, I mean, you look at all the old pictures from the 20s, the early 1900s and so forth, even the 1950s, 1960s. I mean, look at the Bee Gees in the 70s. I mean, they turn sideways, they disappear. It's like it's just a leisure suit with nobody in it, because everybody was so thin, right? What happened around then? Well, that's the whole crux of the issue as far as I'm concerned. But the point is, the occasional person who was really overweight, probably a substantial percentage of those people might have had some sort of endocrine issue, hypothyroidism, or something else that might be contributing, or some genetic factor. But that our genes didn't change in 60 years. What changed was the availability of basically fructose, high fructose corn syrup in the diet, and the ability to ultra process foods. And those things are really, everything started accelerating as soon as the rise of fast food, the ability to, just literally like pull a handle and mold something out of nothing, just a liquid, as my wife says, look at that, a waffle, a bun, it's something else, and all these things based on wheat and sugar, white sugar, not only white sugar, but high fructose corn syrup, or corn syrup, let's just call it. All corn syrup is high in fructose, but there's really high fructose corn syrup also, which we call high fructose corn syrup. But in any case, all of that being made or produced cheaply due to government subsidizing basically corn production, suddenly you've got all this excess fructose. And at the same time, so there's a bias on the part of everybody back in the day, and physicians also, that, overweight was just a behavioral problem. Move more, eat less, and you'll be fine. So those people who were overweight, well, they're just lazy. They need to get off the couch and do whatever, and get to the gym, right? And so what did we see a growth of? Gyms, and then people to help, other programs to help people eat less. What it took a long time to get people to recognize is all of the metabolic processes in the system, in our bodies, in our brains, in our endocrine system, everywhere, the whole body is set up to not lose weight, basically. So I think in terms of, kind of historically or paleologically speaking, if you go back, how long have humans been on Earth? If you think of it, as Homo sapiens, I mean, hundreds of thousands of years, probably, right? So if you go back 100,000 years, we were still human beings, Homo sapiens, exact same physiology, genetics, the whole thing. We just didn't shave or use antiperspirants. And yet, what did we do? Well, there were no farms. We didn't start settling down for last 15, 20,000 years, maybe 10. And figure out how to grow things. You had to domesticate. We live on protein and fat. And so you had to have a stationary protein source. Well, that comes from animal products. Sorry, vegetable protein people. We didn't live 100,000 or hundreds of thousands of years on plant protein. It was just impossible. So we became who we are based on animal protein. So when you start settling a civilization and people don't move as much, in those days we were nomadic, chasing our food, all that stuff. As soon as civilization started settling down, then you'd see, you could see more plant food coming in because you could grow it. It was more controlled, society, all those constructs that went up around society and so on. But it wasn't until the last 60 years that this obesity thing exploded. And the only thing I can look at in the United States to explain that, there are very few things. But one of those is, at some point, high fructose corn syrup became very, very cheap for food producers, food manufacturers, let's say, food companies, to start using. And you had this explosion in all these different processed foods because fructose is really cheap. And you could dump this into lots of different things and still keep the cost down. And so you get variety, and the whole center part of your grocery store is full of these foods. If you look closely, even the things that don't taste sweet will very often have some corn syrup in them. And that started, in the 70s, basically, when we started subsidizing the production of ethanol because of a gas shortage. I mean, crazy as that sounds. So fast forward, and now we've been doing research on obesity and all the things that go along with it. And we're, I understand, and what I explain to my patients is the problem isn't that you're under-exercised or that you have a protein malnutrition problem. The problem is that your system is just overrun with sugar and starch and what people call carbohydrates. We probably talked about this before. So you can't out-exercise your carb consumption is basically what it comes down to. But we talked about the ultra marathoners and the elite athletes and so forth. But the average person who's, sitting, doing what I do, sit at a desk for a job and talk to patients, they just don't have that level of intensity. They're not, let's face it, elite athletes generally are exercising for a living. And so most of us don't exercise for a living. Some of us work really hard, but we're not exercising that way. So it's very hard to out exercise your body's own insulin levels, and it's the insulin in your system and insulin resistance that promotes the obesity and promotes fat storage, and fat, not only storage, but making new fat.
When somebody comes in to your office and they ask you about exercise, this is what you tell them, I presume, and you don't actually require them when you start helping them lose weight, and as part of your protocol, you actually don't require or even worry necessarily. I think you don't worry about it is probably the best way to
No, that's
put
exactly
it.
right.
You don't tell them you should be walking or you should be hitting the gym or you should be blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, I'll point that out to people. If they don't ask, I'll ask them, well, what about exercise? And they'll look at me and go, I don't know. What about
the cold
exercise?
sweat breaks out?
Yeah, the cold sweat breaks out. And this is how people feel and why they have given up sometimes. I tell them, yeah, we'll worry about that later. If you get to your healthy body weight goal and you're not exercising at all, we'll start having some conversations about what you should be doing. But my experience is that as soon as people get their starch and sugar down, their carbs in their diet down, that inflammation level starts to drop. Their joints start to feel better. They sleep better. Their energy goes up, and they will start moving spontaneously more. They'll come in and tell me what they're doing. We ask them, did you do any exercise in the last month? And then, what'd you do? How much? How often? Because people who are exercising, they love to be recognized for that. Like, yeah, I started walking, and they're so proud of that. Like, but what it comes down to is they felt good enough to do it, and that to me is the whole point. Telling people to do something that makes them feel really lousy, if not puts them in pain, in order to achieve this goal. It's easier to just live with the extra body weight than to try to go out and do something really miserable, particularly when the advice they're getting is just eat less, because that has never been shown to work. The low fat versus the low carb diet. Why does a low fat diet make sense? Because it has lower calories in. On its face, that's not horrible, but when you apply that to a general population of people who have obesity as an issue, you're going to leave most of them wanting.
Yeah, I mean, it's even as a healthy person, it's hard. It can be hard to exercise as a healthy person, just for a number of different reasons, but especially when you're hungry.
Yeah, right.
Exercising is really hard.
Right.
When you're eating less and you're really you're food focused or calorie restricting, counting your calories. It's really mentally draining. I mean, not only is it physically draining, but it's mentally draining to be in that position or to frame it in that way.
Yeah, and you have to figure out, I have to reduce my calorie consumption by 500 per day. What's the easiest way to do that? Well, you cut out the things that have fat, because fat has 9 calories per gram. So if I cut back on the fat, then I'll eat fewer calories.
There is a logic to it. There's a logic to it.
Yeah, right. No, it's completely. I can see it.
Yeah.
I went on a low fat craze once about 20 years ago. Lost a bunch of weight. But it was completely unsustainable. Like I can't say I was hungry all the time, but I was focused on food all the time. Like, okay, when's my next meal? Which gets to the conversation a little bit about satiety.
Yeah, well, and calories too.
And calories, yeah. So at the end of the day, there is a very solid truth behind the calories in, calories out, kind of equation. It does come down to, if you're consuming too much energy, you're going to have to store some of it or burn it, right? So doing some exercises, I think, is a great idea. Resistance training, I think, is the best. But for preserving muscle mass, building muscle mass, the muscle mass is really the storehouse of metabolic health, right? So skeletal muscle, particularly thighs, buttocks, biceps, all those muscles that you see people working out when they go to the gym. So preserving muscle mass.
Just on that point, that I heard a great way to kind of, the pithy phrasing of this was, you exercise to build the muscle, but you eat to lose the fat.
Right. And your muscle will help you lose the fat because there's more metabolically active tissue. Fat tissue is metabolically active, but it doesn't burn the energy the way, it's a big endocrine organ, but it doesn't burn the energy the way muscle does. But people overthink that too. They think muscle that you can burn all your energy if you just exercise, but your brain is actually what consumes half your energy every day. And then your heart, and then your liver. It's the muscle mass is 10%, it's nipping around the margins. So don't go out there thinking exercise is going to be the key, because it's really only a small percentage of the amount of energy you burn every day. But anyway, so the calorie, it is at the end of the day, it's a calories in, calories out thing. But when you have 100 pounds of excess body fat to store, and you weigh 300 pounds, let's say, and if you look at the traditional, how many calories can I consume if I weigh 300 pounds? Well, if I cut my calorie consumption by 500 calories, then I should lose a pound a week. And and they do all these mathematical flips and twists. But the bottom line is, in my experience, if you do it that way, as you mentioned, it's just very hard to sustain that unless you're being very intentional about the calories you cut, right? If you cut protein calories, first of all, people who get to be 300 pounds probably are protein malnourished anyway, because and the reason they hurt is because they're under muscled for the amount of weight they're trying to carry around. That's part of it. But inflammatory hormones, things like that also make things hurt. But if you'd been eating the appropriate amount of protein in the first place and eating it first in every meal, instead of, kind of it goes along side by side with the French fries and the bread and the soda pop, protein is the source of satiety. You can get satiety from something like spinach if you eat enough of it, but protein that's really the satiety source. Fat doesn't yield a lot of satiety. If you eat fat by itself, it doesn't fill you up and make you not want to eat anymore. Mostly that's protein.
Yeah.
Right? Fat makes your protein yummier, and it'll make your vegetables yummier as far as that goes.
And your carbs.
And your potatoes,
carbs.
your starch, and all that stuff. But your satiety source is protein. Your satiation source is primarily protein. So you got to get people thinking, okay, the protein is what I really need to live. It's the building blocks. It's what it takes. Everything in my body, all the machinery in my body is made of protein, or amino acids are affected by that. The enzymes that make things run, those are all proteins.
So I'll push back on that just a little bit, because there is a theory out there, and there's some evidence, and there's, anecdotally and otherwise, this is the fiber debate, which is fiber also seems to be a source of satiety. And there's a theory that, and maybe we can have our cake and eat it too here, because with vegetables, they're obviously a great source of fiber, and it's the fiber that you're satiated when you eat those, and you actually consume less calories in that way. Not that there's necessarily any even nutritional benefit beyond that, which I've read in a couple of like paper abstracts and stuff. But do you have any thoughts about that, or have you thought about that very much?
No, I would agree that fiber, just based on its volume, bulk, let's say, if you eat enough spinach, it can be very a good source of satiety. But how much do you have to eat of that to feel the same way you would if you had a 4-ounce steak, or a 6-ounce steak, or an 8-ounce steak, right? So fiber, just putting volume, something that takes up space in your stomach, will trigger the satisfaction hormones like leptin, for example, to make you feel like, oh, I ate something, and counteract the hunger. And that, but fiber sources tend not to be protein sources, right? And that to me has been part of the big ruse over the years is, gee, just eat, salads. Everybody talks about that. Oh, I eat salads all the time. Uh-huh. And then when you really want to eat something, what do you eat? Oh, I have pasta. Because salad is with no protein. Eventually, you're going to need to get your protein. And that plant sources generally are very low in protein. They have no vitamin B12. What I tell people is, you can live without plants. You can't live without animals in your diet, because vitamin B12 doesn't come from plants. Period.
The vegans are coming after you.
Well, ask them how they get their B12. Oh, I take a vitamin. Okay. Or I eat, whatever it is. But a B12 is a strictly human or strictly animal food thing. But we're absolutely dependent on B12. We got to have it.
The model that I've always used, this is to get to the calories in, calories out thing, and what you're saying in a lot of different ways is that the model is necessary, or the model is true. It's just not a sufficient explanation. It's not complete.
Right. Calories in, calories out is something that you have to understand, but to use that as your main treatment recommendation for somebody who's trying to lose weight is terribly underserving your patients if that's all you tell them. Oh, calories in, calories out.
You treat it like a math problem, and it's
right.
It's way more complicated than that.
It's a more complex problem than just, this plus this equals this, or this minus this equals this.
Yes, no, it's an oversimplification. Because the thing I always think about when people say, oh, it's just calories in, calories out. Well, it is, but, how about you eat in a caloric deficit? And because if that's all that matters, just eat donuts for 3 days and see how you feel. And you'll be in a deficit and losing weight, and just tell me how that goes.
Right. We'll just take half this Long John, and you have this every 2 hours, and we'll calculate the math on that. And gee, you're 500 calorie deficit, but yeah, people feel lousy.
Exactly.
Right?
And that for me, just that one example, just blows up that whole
right.
The whole line of thinking. It's just
calories, the calories in, calories out.
There's way more to talk about than just that.
Right. So donuts are a bad source of protein also, by the way.
Which is why I use donuts and not something like steak, because you probably have much better results with steak.
And you can sell a lot of donuts for very little money, and people will buy them. This gets into the whole kind of the limbic system and the what I call yay factor foods. Sugar. It just hits you like a drug. It literally has a drug effect on the limbic system and makes us go, yay, when we eat it. Because there's no satiety associated with it, and there's really no biological function for all that sugar, it doesn't ever fill us up. There's very low satiety with it. And because there's no biological reason you have to eat it, there really is no natural switch to shut it off.
Which is I think everybody has experienced.
Yeah,
it's like all of a sudden the whole bag is gone.
Oreos.
I ate the whole cake, the whole thing ice cream.
The whole thing. I can't believe I ate the whole thing. Some old commercial. And so people will eat these things. They'll eat a whole bag of chips. Big old honking bag. I probably am guilty of this myself. There's no shutoff mechanism because there's no reason to eat it in the first place, right? Whereas a natural negative feedback would say, you have to eat this. It's required that you eat this. And with protein, I would say, people are hungry. They eat something that's got protein in it. At some point, they stop being hungry for protein, and they never overeat it. People might have one 16-ounce steak, but they won't have 5. They'll just naturally, they won't even have to think about it. They'll just be like, ooh, that's good, and then somebody will bring out a piece of pie, and you go, ooh, and you get it's not hunger, it's a craving, or some other limbic system it's happy food. It's not, gee, nobody ever orders a second steak in the restaurant, but they can always find room for dessert, or more bread. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, people call it second stomach. I got a second stomach for dessert, but that's really not.
Yeah. What it really comes down to is, you're just pouring sugar on top of whatever you ate. And there's always room for sugar. It's like the old adage, you put all these big rocks in a jar, and then you put these small rocks around those and shake it up and put more small rocks. And then you dump sand and you look in there and go, that jar is completely full. And then you can take like 6 12-ounce cans of beer and pour it in, and it still finds it doesn't go over the top. And the moral being, there's always room for beer. So there's always room for carbs. Same thing. It's like it's a whole different. It's not hunger. It's a different experience.
Somewhat related to that is something that I think about a lot that you've mentioned just a couple times in the past, but it's when you're thinking about protein sources, or you're thinking about, if you think in these categories of like, okay, protein's good, fat can be good, can be bad depending on what's with it, and then carbs bad. If you think about it that way, what about your protein sources where there's protein, but there's also a lot of fat, because that gets into the calories discussion? Something like cheese is always what I think about. I think you've described it as like protein to calorie ratio or something. We don't have to get, mathematical about it, but just how do you think about that?
This is where the calorie in, calorie out thing becomes important, because if your cheese does not stimulate an insulin response, insulin turns on your fat-making lipases that force your body to store fat. Carbohydrate does that. Carbohydrate raises your insulin. Insulin forces you to store fat. Fat does not raise your insulin level. It does not force you to store fat. But fat is energy rich, and if you have enough energy in the form of fat, your body will have to store that somewhere, and that can become fat also, right? So eating cheese has some protein, but it also is energy dense. So on our program, we will advise people to keep the amount of cheese down on a day-to-day basis, just on a purely functional level, because they'll reach that calorie in, calorie out balance much faster than if they eat some other source of protein: eggs, fish, seafood, so on and so on. Meat, red meat. So the trick there, the key there, is that fat doesn't stimulate insulin. Insulin is the ultimate arbiter of obesity, for the most part, for the vast majority of people. Hydration has something to do with it. Fructose is particularly heinous carbohydrate, and so on. But there's just different ways to think about it. But ultimately,
we should talk about fruit in another episode, by the way. We haven't really talked about fruit, but
carbohydrate insulin hypothesis accounts for probably most people's body fat problems. People don't get obese from eating cheese without the chips. It's not the case. It's not the queso. It's the chips, because people just don't eat all the fat without the carbs to dress it up,
Right.
So
well, you could almost more accurately say it's the two of them together. It's that carbs and fat don't occur in nature together,
right?
And you put them together, and it's just a brutal,
and it's
brutal combination.
And it's biological in the sense of the way that combination hits our limbic system and makes us go, "Ooh, my God, that's good." It's bread and butter, right? Captain Crunch. It's oats and sugar.
Two things that have been evolutionary scarce: sugar and fat sources, and you just put them together and slam them down, and you can do it all day.
And when you figure the body sees weight loss biologically, paleo 100 to 1,000 years ago, losing weight was a really bad thing. If you were losing weight, that was starvation. By God, everything to avoid that. Your system has really effectively one hormone that drives hunger. It's called ghrelin, and it has about 7-10 different hormones, mechanisms for fighting that hunger. Leptin, for example, satiety hormone. Insulin actually is a satiety hormone. Cholecystokinin and others. But all of those together are not as potent as that ghrelin. That hunger hormone is incredibly strong. That's a survival thing. Problem is, none of us starves from calorie deficits these days. And so we're fighting our ghrelin we've been fighting our ghrelin with foods that don't really satisfy our basic biological need for protein and are shooting our insulin levels up such that we're just storing fat meal after meal after meal after meal. And we need to disrupt that.
And ghrelin, I believe, if I remember correctly, ghrelin is the primary culprit when you get hunger pains, when you don't eat at a particular time that you normally eat.
Ghrelin will remind you, yes.
Yeah, that's where you get that.
When you're hungry, it's your ghrelin.
It's that, right? Almost that crampy feeling. You're like, what is going on here?
And the thing that will satisfy that most effectively is protein, because that's what you need to live. Ghrelin's designed to make you eat your protein, but that's not how we've been told. We've been told it's a calories in, calories out, which is confusing.
Yeah, it is. It's confusing. It's fascinating.
So people try to lose weight without getting enough protein. They're hungry all the time, so they just keep eating the wrong crap. Then they don't lose weight, and they get higher and higher insulin levels, more and more body fat, and then they're just angry because somebody gave them bad advice, and that somebody has been medical professionals for too long. It's starting to change.
But it's starting to change. Well, I know you have to run, so we will wrap it here. But there's so many more interesting things to talk about: GLP-1s, fruit, fasting. There's a bunch of stuff came up in those last few minutes that I feel like we'd have another episode for, but so we'll cover it then.
Thanks for listening to The Treatment Plan. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And if someone comes to mind who'd like this show, tell them about it or send it their way using the share button.